And welcome back. Let's go ahead and get ready to actually start making our obstacles here and really kind of give ways for our player to kind of be restricted. And so if we look currently at our ground here, when our player is zipping along here, one of the things that happens as we get near the edge is that, of course, we can just leave that area. So we probably want to have some kind of boundary here that prevents the player from just falling off the edge of the world here. So in order to get that started, let's go ahead and examine our ground. Now I currently have this set to 333. That's okay. You can have your other values. I do recommend having it fairly large, but not too large, or else you're going to have to put more obstacles in later. But I think this is a good starting size right here. And so what we want to do is add a wall around here. And I want you to go ahead and pause the video because I think you can probably create a wall on your own. But go ahead and pause the video and let's just see what you come up with for a wall. So let's go ahead and actually go about creating those walls here. And so probably the easiest way to go about doing that is we can go ahead and use one of these obstacle cubes kind of as a starting point. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose one of those cubes. So let's go to this one right here. It looks good. I want to maybe take this one down because it looks like it's floating just a little bit here. And what I want to do is duplicate this in such a way. Actually, that's one at an angle, so let's go to a different cube. There we go. And let's just go ahead and Control D to duplicate that. And I'm going to move that underneath here just so I can rename this. And we're going to call this my wall. And we can then just move that out so it's not on top of the other one. And now we can go ahead and start resizing this. So we can go ahead and, for example, you may not want it so tall, but we want to make sure that it's big enough that it's going to span effectively the entire length here. And again, you'll be able to play around this to go ahead and make your own. You might want to adjust that, make sure that, for example, you don't have it floating. So one way you can do that is check your Y coordinate here. You do, if we zoom in here just a little bit, you see we do have a little bit of a gap. So I'm going to set my Y value to something like, let's say, 1. That should be pretty close there to that ground level. And then we're going to go ahead and zoom that back out, and I'll go ahead and continue my adjustments here. All right, that looks pretty good there. And then once we have our first wall done, it's real easy to get our other walls, because then we can just duplicate this. So again, I'll just use Control D. And so now I have my second wall, so then I can just use my movement tools. I can just slide that across my arena. And I just want to make sure that that made it there to the edge. It's pretty good there. And then we will, again, duplicate this one more time. And now this one, we want to actually rotate this. So let's rotate that, oh, not the X direction. We want that in the Z direction. Well, just rotate that 90 degrees here. There we go. Get my proper orientation. Now, there we go. Just had to get the right axis here. And I can now grab this and move that into place. And so now we have 3 sides. And then again, I can just duplicate this to bring it down and bring it to the back here. And again, I'm probably going to want to check to make sure that everything looks relatively okay. We're now going for a picture perfect here. But something that looks pretty good just to make sure that the player is going to be still within this zone here. I think we're looking pretty good. All right, so we have our walls. Now, we can, of course, do other things with these walls. So, like, you can make these thinner, thicker, however you want, make them taller. But I think what I want to do is go to my materials and actually add a new material for this wall. So we're going to choose a new color here. So let's go ahead and maybe I want these to be kind of like a cold blue. There we go. And so that would be my new material. I forgot to name this, so let's just call this the wall. material. And then what we can do is we'll just attach that material into these objects here, so that way they can, of course, be attached. Now notice, if I had been smart and ahead time, I could have attached this material all at once, but as it is, it's fine. So you can see now we have a nice good blue there to signify, hey, that's a wall, that's the end of our boundary there. Alright, so let's do a little housekeeping real quick here. So all my cubes, of course, are just called cube right now. I might want to have a better name for these. For example, I might want to call this the obstacle. And we can go through and rename all these to, like, let's just call this like obstacle maybe 2 or obstacle 1. For now, I'm just going to call them all obstacle. I can go ahead and change those later if I want. And of course I have my 4 walls. Now I'm just going to leave those there for now just because I just didn't want to see the word cube. But let's go ahead and create a empty here. And I'm going to reset the transform on that just so that way it's zeroed out. And let's rename this from game object to, let's say, game environment. Alright, just so we know like that is everything that's inside of here that's pretty much not like the player or camera or stuff like that. So I'm going to grab all my obstacles and walls, and I'm just going to drag them down on top of the game environment. So now they're nested underneath there. So that's going to just kind of keep my hierarchy nice and clean, and I know that everything that's inside of this game environment belongs to this parent group here. So all the obstacles, all the walls, etc. Alright, so now if we take a look at our world as is, and I go ahead and play, one of the things that we of course notice happens when I get to the edge is that I can pass through that. And that is not what we want to happen. We want to have that act as obstacle. I'm actually going to speed my player up just a little bit. Let's make it up to, let's say, 10. And let's go ahead and think about what do we need to do to prevent something from going through each other. Well, in the past, the way that we've handled this is that we've addressed the colliders. And the way that we have colliders interact with our world is that we'd have to add some type of component to them. And the one we're going to use is our rigid body. Not the rigid body 2D like we did previously, because we were in the 3D space. So we want just a regular rigid body. And of course, now you can see we have properties such as mass, angular dampening, we have gravity. In fact, if I were to take my player here, and I'm just going to increase it off the ground just a little more so you can see this, and I press play, the first thing it does is it drops to the ground. So now that the player has mass, you can do that. And also, notice it doesn't fall all the way through the floor because, again, our ground also has a collider. And so when those two objects interact, they're not going to be having it just pass right through. And now I can come up to the wall. Oh, and look, now I have hit that wall. Oh, I'm colliding into it. So yes, our colliders are working the way we expect them to. But notice the player does clip through a little bit, which means we would have some housekeeping to do there. Now, there's one other thing that we need to address since we are operating in the 3D space. Now, this can sometimes happen if you are colliding into things. Let me, for example, go to the player here. And if I turn off gravity, sometimes when you notice, we start floating a little bit here. And that's not what we really want to happen. So if we take gravity off, this is something that, again, can happen. And I'm just going to leave that off for now because what I want to introduce is something called constraints. And constraints are going to help keep this player object a little bit more kind of bound. And I'm actually going to adjust the player so he's a little bit closer to that ground floor there. But I want to freeze the rotation because that's going to keep it from spinning like we saw. But I also want to freeze my positions here too. Now I don't want to affect the X because then I won't be able to move left or right. And I don't want to affect the Z because then I won't be able to move forward or back. But I do want to stop the Y because that's going to keep me from moving up into the air. So if I press that now and I come toward that edge, even though I still have gravity turned off, you'll notice I can just bump into that and I never go flying up or floating into the air because there's no physics interacting that says, hey, bounce off of these things. Alright, so we have our basic collision now set up to be able to operate here within our game space. And again, there's a couple housekeeping things we'll have to work on. For example, like passing into this border here. But that's things that we can address within time. We, of course, still have our obstacles. You can see, like, for example, I can sneak through that side there. That might be something I want to address too, is the ability for us to kind of have some real proper collision spaces here. But I think we are in a good starting point.